Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today is Sunday, September 29th, 2024. It's the last Sunday in the month, and so we're having our regular monthly Global Town Hall. This is, of course, produced by Project Save the World, and it's always a pleasure for me to be the host. I should also thank people who have been contributing financially because it does make such a difference. We do need money to make this happen. It's not completely free, although it's quite cheap. So if you want to donate money, that's always appreciated. You can do so by our website to savetheworld.ca, and up in the blue menu bar there's a little button that says donate, so you can click there, and I think it puts it through you on PayPal. Anyway, I see two people have entered the waiting room, so I must open the door and say hello to people. Here we go. And I'm going to let Marilyn in, and somebody called Fireflies, but I think it's really some sort of bot that takes notes for Brian von Hertzen, who must be lurking someplace nearby. At least I hope so. Anyway, I do see Marilyn, so I can say hi to her. I don't say hello to bots. I don't know. I don't quite know what to do with bots. Hi, Marilyn. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Lots going on. I can talk later about that.
Well, you're the first person here, so you can get us started by talking a little bit about what is going on with you.
Well, okay. A couple of things. First of all, the main trail or canyon that I have been monitoring for almost 10 years, and it's supposed to be a conservation easement, and nothing is supposed to be done to it. And what's happening is that there's a homeowners association who decided it belongs to them, and they have dug out, and I mean, this is their endangered species in there. Essentially, they have dug out the creek, and who knows what they're making, but it's really bad. So I have lots of videos of it, and I'm going to see what I can do about it. So that's
is there any illegal way you can stop them from doing anything harmful? I mean, are there regulations in California about things like that?
Yeah, they're correct. There is, and the county has determined that this place is supposed to not be touched at all. That it's a conservation easement where there are species of special concern: the red-legged frog, the dusky-footed woodrat. There are Cooper's hawks that nest and fledge there. There's a whole bunch of animals and even some plants, because it's what's called a riparian habitat. It's on a creek. So essentially it's being destroyed. And I've noticed that the animals, I'm not seeing the animals, the ones I usually see, I'm not there, and it's because of what they're doing. So what I am doing is I am putting together a letter, and I'm going to, with documentation, and going to the county, but I'm also copying in the supervisors. This is near, the ballots and whatever, election. My mind isn't working on November. So if it doesn't get any movement from them, then I'm going to go public and talk to the media about it.
Okay, well, don't lose any time. If time is relevant, maybe you better get the jump on it. I don't know.
That's one thing. The other thing is just happened today, and I may be getting a call from a sheriff, and if that happens, I have to leave, because on my walk, I'm in the mountains, and on my walk that I do every morning, I walk about 4 or 5 miles. There was a plastic bag with some dead animals in it, and it looks like they are it's really awful. It's awful. So and that just happened a couple hours ago that I discovered that.
Well, what do you think it is? Somebody killed the animals, or somebody's collecting animals that died and they didn't take the bag away?
No, they killed them. It looks to me like these these little weasels they're a species of special concern, and you're not supposed to kill them. They do eat chickens, and it looks like somebody poisoned them and put them in plastic bags and then threw them just on the side of the road on the bank.
Okay. Well, that's I don't know what to say. Bless you, my dear. I mean, I'm good luck. And I want to say hello to Bill Geimer, who's sitting here listening to this, and in Vancouver, where I think he feels safe. No dead animals in his front yard. Hello,
sorry.
Bill. How are you?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Once again, greetings from Vancouver Island,
Uh-huh.
not Vancouver.
Okay, well,
Okay.
you guys are all smeared together in my mind. I've been out there 2 or 3 times, but in terms of a clear map of where things are, not very clear in my mind. I'm sorry.
Sorry to be picky, but I favor having Vancouver Island as a province one day.
Oh,
That's how different I hope we are over here.
really? Well, okay. You want to expand on that?
No,
Are people on Vancouver Island different from people in Vancouver?
I will tell you, I don't want to spend much time on this. I came because I have a short something I want to get off my chest whenever you
Okay.
say, but I'll just say this. We have a greater appreciation of nature and what is given to us. And we do not a good job of preserving it, but we work on it a little more than people on the mainland. And so we're a little more about how to figure out also how to give services to people when we spend money rather than trickle down corporate economics. That may change in the next election. We have an election coming up October 9th where we may all move to the right. But generally, it's a more peaceful, more environmentally sensitive place to live than the mainland, where Vancouver sprawls out right across the strait from us. And that's just one rural dweller's opinion about city life, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I won't dispute it. But I have the impression that BC in general is more environmentally attuned than people in the rest of Canada. And I don't know. I'm not really thinking in terms of whether there's evidence from the voting, but maybe that's true too. Uh, are people in terms of who gets elected and on what grounds? Is there reason to think that British Columbians are more environmentalists than the rest of us?
We just very few years ago, very almost recently, had a government that where the Greens held the balance of power with 3 seats.
Mm-hmm.
The only place that the federal NDP would probably not exist were it not for all the ridings that prevail on Vancouver Island. So yeah, you're generally speaking, you're right. Although we don't know what to do with our forests. There have been really brave people who have put their bodies on the line to preserve old growth forests on the island here. And they've paid a price, but they've had some success. They have actually had some success, but the struggle goes on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you say you have something on your mind that you want to get off your chest.
I do.
Well, actually, so far you are the only 2 people here. I don't know what's happened to everybody today, but maybe they'll straggle in later. This is so far the lowest attendance I've ever
Oh,
had. So
oh,
I don't know what that means. You're going to have to do a lot of work to keep up
oh.
there into the conversation. Go ahead and tell us what your issue is.
Well, as you know, I think you know, after open heart surgery and various other things, I've stepped back from, and I'm concerned about my wife's health, and I'm old, and I've stepped back a lot to simplify my life. But there is something that a warning and a caution to myself recently on matters of peace that I thought I would share
Right.
in the hope that
What we're here for.
that folks would think about it. As you know, I admire the focus on environmental matters, but I've said here and to you before that war and violence can wipe out in a moment all the good things that all the good people like you two that are on this meeting right now have done. So my focus is on war and violence. And a warning and a caution came to me, to myself, and perhaps to others in the peace movement when I ordered my supply of white poppies and considered our upcoming national celebration of war, death, and destruction, otherwise known as Remembrance Day. And the warning is this: when we participate in debating the merits of wars and violent conflicts, we are implicitly accepting the arena of war and violence. We are playing someone else's game on their field. And I am guilty. I have been guilty. Since I resigned from the U.S. Army all those decades ago, my greatest concern has been the death and displacement of civilians in wars. So I've been particularly outraged at the crimes of Israel and Western support of them. I have come to believe that Netanyahu is worse than Putin, and I have spoken out. But in doing so, I have been unwittingly playing the game in a stadium that could be named Violence Place. Actually, the name would also include a corporate sponsor. It might be called Rogers Violence Place or Bombardier Violence Arena, but that's what I've been doing. Nobody in power is listening to my voice or to yours, as a matter of fact. But those voices should be about the stupidity and ineffectiveness of all war. Should not be about the relative merits of our violence versus their violence in a particular conflict. It should be about how ridiculous it is for media to continue giving attention and respect to public figures who pontificate, obfuscate, and equivocate about violent conflicts. So that's one of the two things that I needed to get off my chest. And I have finally a brief more word about Remembrance Day. We should perhaps remind people that today and in the future, Remembrance Day, future Remembrance Days, there can be no celebration of bravery, valor, and sacrifice of soldiers. That's because all those individual qualities, to the extent that they existed in the past, are now obsolete. They're gone. They have been replaced by killer drones, missiles, warplanes, and technology that allows you to blow up cell phones. Nobody's sons and grandsons will die falling on a grenade for their buddy. this march of deadly weapons and the corresponding death of any ethical restraints on their use began actually with what we celebrate as the Great War, the war that produced Remembrance Day. So maybe remembering that is what we should be doing on 11/11. Though no one hears our message of peace now, but at least let the message be about the stupidity of violence and not about who is winning. So I will try to do that, and I am very grateful to have been able to share this little warning that I received, and hope that others might at least think about not playing in the game of whose violence is best. Gracias.
That's an important beginning to a conversation that I wish there were some more people here who would like, because I've been having a similar conversation with other people who are not here and who have very interesting approaches, angles on that. One of them is Robin Collins, whose article will appear in the October issue of Peace Magazine, where he's asking the question, is political violence ever justified? So, of course, he's taking the whole history of pacifism and the rationale for complete commitment to nonviolence. I find myself for the first time in 60, 70 years, maybe, actually debating that in my own mind. I mean, I didn't have to think about the other point of view particularly until this war. And I'm back into ambivalence, certainly not neutrality, internal conflict about that question. When I say 60 or 70 years, I'm thinking of World War II, when I was a child and I didn't have any question in my own mind about the morality of fighting that war. To me, World War II was, sometimes it's been called the good war. You know, it was a war where we were really attempting to defeat a force that was so evil that you could justify violence as a way of doing so. And I think almost everybody, I don't know whether you were old enough to be in World War II. I think I was about 13, 12, 13, maybe 14 when Hiroshima happened. And of course, the war ended very shortly, within a week or two after that. So my memory was of living in a town where my parents both worked for the military. They worked on an Air Force base, which was, my mother was in the business of procuring materials for the war. So she would write contracts to buy everything from a screwdriver to a hydroelectric dam. And she was pretty good at it. My father managed some warehouses. So I had no contact with anybody who had any doubt that we should be fighting against Japan and Germany. But you know, when I was about 18, I went to Berkeley and became involved with a man who married later, whose family were pacifists. His father had fought in First World War and never spoke of it because it was too horrible. And he came back to civilian life as a pacifist. And so I got that point of view imbued in me from year eight, when I was just barely 18, I think. So that's, uh, I guess I adopted that primarily, and certainly did not anymore believe that we should. Certainly, I never afterwards believed that we should have used nuclear weapons in Japan. I'm not sure when or even whether I began to question that the war itself was unavoidable or necessary. Um, but I'm back into the question of, I think that it's very important to protect democracy. The odd thing is, I think democracy is defunct. I think it needs the version of democracy we're using now is not workable and needs to be replaced. But the only way we're going to have a chance of replacing it is if we have at least this much democracy. And I see the prospect of losing that as very real. And I think there are times when, if you don't do something to protect your freedoms to function, you may get in a situation where you don't have any more opportunity. I remember for 15, 20 years, I was talking to my Russian friends saying, you should certainly be concerned. This was even when Yeltsin was the head of the country. But I was saying, if you don't do something to make sure that you establish and maintain democracy, you may find yourself in a gulag and you don't have a chance at that point. It's a hell of a lot harder if you're locked up than it is right now. So do more, do more. Well, that didn't resonate very much with my Russian friends. And I see one of them is right here now. He's come in. Hello, Alexei Prokorenko. I'm
Hello.
talking about your family or your relatives or your friends, and maybe even you at a younger age,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so I think that, we do need to realize that protecting our opportunity to make progress is important, extremely important. And sometimes if you lose that, it's more dangerous than anything you can do. So there's where I am hung up in this feeling that it's very important for Ukraine to be able to survive this war and with its government or something like a government intact and with people. And then, for heaven's sake, something's got to happen in Russia to change the mentality to one that requires and demands that the governments be accountable. So unless we have and establish a rule of law, international law, I just don't know how you can say we will be nonviolent, because our society, I live in Canada, a very peaceable society, but we have police and we have laws. And if somebody tries to break into my place, I call the cops, and they're here within a couple of minutes, and they will take care of it for me. But we don't have that internationally. And unless we have something like that, then people will have to resort to self-help, defending themselves, and that's violent. And so I don't like it. But I don't always see an alternative that is a really credible alternative. Now, Bill, I this is replying, by the way, Alexei, to something that Bill said, simulated this diatribe, if you will, of mine, of screed. So, Bill, all right, the floor is yours. And then I think Alexei may have some thoughts that he wants to share too.
Yeah, thank you. What I said for Alexi's benefit was that when we get into the pros and cons of a particular conflict and debating the merits, that we are implicitly accepting that we are participants in the arena of war and violence. And with respect, I think that's just what Meta did. And although I'm happy to hear that she's ambivalent, that's all I'm asking is that people think about the fact that because I have been guilty of it. I've been so outraged about Israel and its crimes that I've participated in our violence versus their violence discussions, and that's playing in somebody else's park, and I've been guilty of it, and I don't think it should be done. I think we should be talking about the stupidity and ineffectiveness of war, all war, and that we should not give attention and respect to public figures and that the media continues to call on. So I'm trying to teach myself not to play in that.
Bill,
But
you were too young. Excuse me, but you were too young to fight in World War II. But
yeah.
if you'd been old enough, would you have fought against Hitler?
Let me just defer that because for 1 second, and I'll just tell you that I was a tank unit commander on the border of what was known as the free world. I was looking with my tanks across visually at tanks of the communist East Germany, the evil communist. So no, I didn't. I was born the day that the French government capitulated and became assistant to the Nazis and very close to the town of Dunkirk. I'm 84 years old. So I was a Cold Warrior before I resigned from the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division. What troubles me about, I will read this article, but I'm sure I've read it before many times. And is political violence ever justified? And I talk about the good war. The answer to that, to me, first of all, is that hypothetical questions get hypothetical answers. And we have a real situation, in the words of the immortal Sarah Palin, how's that violence working out for you? Has everybody got peace and security, or has there always been somebody else that we need to be opposing, and we need to, well, we got to use violence on these people? And it's been going on for quite a while now. So that is sort of, that's the answer to would you have fought in World War II? It's a hypothetical question. I was born in 1940. What we have right now is Pax Americana, which is essentially no different than Pax Romana. In 2,000 years, all we've gotten to is we're going to get peace and security if we enforce peace and security. And we have an existential situation now.
We will get peace and security if we have some sort of law enforcement. Frankly, if we don't have law enforcement, we will not have peace and security. Yeah. And anytime you see, for example, if a police force goes on strike or something like that, and they're out of commission, crime breaks out all over the place because there's nobody to stop them. And we really do need law enforcement, and we have none when it comes to international law enforcement. That's the problem. You're a lawyer, honey.
I am a lawyer. I am a lawyer.
And be an international lawyer for the moment, because that's really important.
I am
not going to get anywhere without, just admonishing people, be nice to each other. Okay, go say that to somebody, but don't waste, your breath on me, because I really know that some kind of institutional arrangements are required before you can expect people in general to behave themselves.
When can we expect that from the Western-dominated United Nations? Is that where it's going to come from? The international law enforcement,
You really want to
respect
know
for
my
international
recipe?
huh?
Okay, I mean, you don't want to hear this because it's a digression, but
I want to hear everything you have to
I,
say.
oh, okay. I do think we need to change the UN, but I don't think the UN is going to change itself. I do
Okay.
think that we need to set up citizens' assemblies outside of the UN and make them work. And then when we have them working, we will have this kind of evidence to change public opinion enough to be able to put pressure. Because right now, the UN is run by nations and it's run by the governments of those nations, and it's not run by the people of those nations. So we need to have some real citizens' democracy. And when we get that, then we can talk about how to change the other institutions of the UN. So that's my short answer.
That's
But
a common ground we have. Did you know that? I really think that the notion of some sort of other organization internationally needs to be explored. So we have a little bit of common ground.
right, good.
But we'll get to the violence part when and if that happens.
I get it. Okay, maybe we should give Alexei a chance. I mean, Marilyn, I'm not sure you want to join this because I don't know. We've never had that conversation, but I know that Alexei has had to think about a lot of these questions in making his move from his own country to being an expatriate in Poland. So, do you have a formulation of your own opinions on these questions, Alexei?
Sorry. First of all, I'm very glad to see you again. It's a really it's an honor for me to be here with you every month. It's a privilege and it is a holiday for me.
Well,
Something I'm waiting
wonderful for
for.
me to, I mean, I'm delighted that you're in my life. So thank you.
It's honey on my heart, as we say in Poland. First of all, we talked about Ukraine's victory. There's been a very good opinion from a politician, Ilya Yashin, who left, who was exchanged actually. He said, I guess it was him who said that you can love Russia and wish a victory to Ukraine at the same time. I guess it was his position, because many people equate Putin and Russia, especially propaganda. They say there is Putin, there is Russia, there is no Putin, there is no Russia. But in fact, here in this war, we can see that the interests of Putin are contravene the interests of Russia, in fact, because if he wins, if he has the upper hand in this war, then it will be over. Everything will be over with the world order as we know it. We only can wait for Xi Jinping to start thinking about how he could seize Taiwan by force. And even I talked with some people from Latin America, among them Uruguayans. They had fought on the front line on the Ukrainian side, of course. They came to Warsaw, and their concern is that the Brazilian government, ironically, both kinds of governments in Brazil, the far right and the far left government, both are friends of Putin, both Bolsonaro and Lula da Silva. So they kind of are on his side, and that guy from Uruguay is afraid that if we agree that something could be made by force, by way of war, if a nuclear power, if a large state can seize land from a smaller neighbor, then it won't be long before Brazil can attack Uruguay. They have a long list of grievances. They had wars in the 19th century, so they're really afraid of Brazil willing to impose its will on by force. And there are many other instances where this lesson that it's possible actually to resolve personal ambitions by war, to resolve some historical grievances by war. We will have like a whole precipitation of different conflicts all around the world. So that
it is the only alternative to a rule of law. If you really have to, if you're in a situation that people find intolerable and completely unacceptable as a political, problem for themselves, the only alternative is nonviolent resistance, and that at a time for maybe 10 years or so, I think was really an option for Russians at a time when almost nobody in Russia has any, oddly, because Tolstoy was so important, and so on. You would think that Russian people would have a high consciousness about the possibility of using nonviolent resistance, but I find they don't. The only Russians that I know are really quite have no sense of agency, and no sense that they can actually do anything to reclaim their own lives in a terrible situation. So, but I was saying, to my friends, go out in the street or do something, protest against this or that, or work, do some kind of resistance against the government while you have the opportunity, because for several years they could have done that, and they didn't, and so now it's probably almost impossible. I would hardly even encourage my friends to do anything of that kind, because all you do is get sent to prison and they might kill you there. So, I understand why they're not willing to take that kind of risk. But for a while, there was an opportunity to do nonviolent resistance, and they didn't. If you had, I remember at times when Milosevic was being hounded, when the people marched on Belgrade, and there are 1 million people in a little, Belgrade is only a tenth the size of Moscow.
Yeah.
But that same month, there would be demonstrations against Putin, and there might be 1,000 people in all of Moscow that would show up for these.
That's all about the numbers.
So there just
very
wasn't
few
enough
people.
A commitment to doing it, and therefore, if you don't have nonviolent resistance and you don't have a rule of law that you can institutionally get justice, how are you going to get anywhere? I don't think so. Bill, your turn. And Charles Tauber is with us too. Charles, we're having a fundamental discussion now about the use of violence.
What I didn't mention that I should, the reason I was listening to you but looking around on my bookshelf was this. And I have thoughts about Ukraine and Russia, but I'm heeding my own warning to myself. The question is what our voice should say about war and violence and its stupidity and ineffectiveness, not about Russia and Ukraine or China and Taiwan, or our violence versus their violence. So I have nothing to say about Ukraine and Russia. I will say,
Bill, hold on.
Just a minute. Wait a minute. It's now my turn. I say that we have an existing situation here that is real. It is not hypothetical. And I learned that in a conversation years ago with Joan Baez, who gave me, I was looking for a copy of her book where someone asked her this, created this hypothetical and kept changing the facts to try to force her into saying, yes, I would use violence in that situation. And therefore, then they could say, well, all this talk about nonviolence as power, you have no currency, no usefulness as that in that because you've admitted that you would use violence in this situation. That I kept changing the facts on and pushing you into. She writes about that in this book that she gave me, and it has had, it makes all the sense in the world to me. I raise it because I want people to think about it, not because I'm trying to say that anything you do is right or wrong or whatever. I'm just saying, take heed of the existing situation. How safe, how secure have we been relying on violence since 20 million people died in this good war that the world seems to still thrive on, and which I discuss as the good war in my book that I hope people. I just sold one, by the way, this week, so it's great. So I'm done now. Thank you.
Okay, well, look, here's the only question. You started off by saying violence doesn't work. War doesn't work.
Right.
Unfortunately, violence does work. Unfortunately, the countries that can win wars are the ones that get to dictate policy for everybody else. Militarism, unfortunately, is very effective. And so is the use of violence for social control, for maintaining social order. The police are essential at the moment. I mean, I have friends who say, let's abolish the police. No way. No, we really need them. And there's a problem because there are bad police and there are good police. And just as there are bad wars and there are good wars. Their good wars are the ones where your side wins and where you're able to protect the kinds of freedoms that we really will enable us to make further progress. But things that are regressive, things that are going to send us back to a Paleolithic period, they're not good and they're no fun. There's certainly no pleasure in them, and it's a terrible sacrifice. But it is effective in getting. That's what rules the world, as power does.
I think you're reframing my question a little bit, my statement a little bit. With respect, and by the way, I support having police. In my military career, I was also for a time a military policeman. I support having police. The question when I said that war doesn't work in achieving what it promises and what we want, peace and security. That's my position. It doesn't work doing that.
You're right. We're in agreement. Once you have an opportunity to do work for progress of any kind, it could be economic development, it could be spiritual growth, I don't know. It certainly could be the development of international institutions that affect and bring into existence the wishes of the majority of the world's population and enforce the laws that the people make. Those things, you want to encourage that, but you have to have an opportunity to do it. And you may get yourself in a situation where you do not have that opportunity. But now we do have that opportunity and we should make the most of it by doing everything to create, for example, you and I agree, then let's have some better UN system of doing what the UN is supposed to do. So we found common ground on that anyway. Good.
And police, and having police, let's not
And
forget
having
that.
police,
I'm in favor of police.
but the police use violence. That's the only thing that is the definition that Weber's notion of government is the organization that has a monopoly on the legitimate use of violence. So we say that the police have a legitimate right to use violence, where you and I do not as citizens, as civilians. And unfortunately, we need it. I wish we didn't, but let's not kid ourselves. We do need police, which does mean that we need to have to authorize some people to use violence on our behalf. And we got to make them accountable to us and make sure that they play by the rules and listen to who's really should be boss, us.
The one thing that about police and the use of violence is that their use of violence is by law, whether it's followed or not, very limited. And I am a lawyer, and the one thing that I know a lot about is the law of self-defense. So police are not authorized to use violence except when their lives or the life of someone else or the physical well-being of someone else are imminently and they reasonably perceive are threatened. So if you want to just take that over into the international realm, that's all fine. But the legitimate, reasonable use of matter of self-defense is the only internationally recognized exception to the rule of nonviolence. And of course, it's being trashed and has been for a long time. But those are the rules, even existing today.
Well, those are the rules I would want to have, aren't they?
Yep.
Same for you. I mean, you want those exact rules. You don't use violence except to prevent some other worse violence.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And not on the 1% possibility that someone might do something bad. They're imminent threats.
Yeah, that's right.
Death and great bodily harm. That's pretty limited, and it hasn't been recognized for a long time, which is another thing that makes war and violence ineffective and dumb to me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now I've spoken enough, and maybe you have more, but let's give our other friends a chance. Marilyn's been here the longest. If you're burning with interest, it should be your turn, and then Alexia. But Charles Tauber is certainly working on helping people who are suffering the effects of war and the traumas, and not only. I imagine, and this is for Charles to answer, really, probably some of the suffering that people experience isn't just having been victims of violence, but of having been the perpetrators of violence in situations where they didn't really need to, when it turns out the other side was not imminently about to do any harm to anyone. And there's a story I read about two guys in one, I don't know, German and American, let's say, I don't know who they were. And they were two guys in the army with guns who found themselves, some distance apart, and each of them had to decide, am I going to let the other person survive, or shall I shoot him? Their job might have been to shoot if you can, but both of them deferred, both of them in a way, just let the other be. And unfortunately, something happened, and let's say the American, I don't know who it was, the American thought that the other guy had shot at him. So he shot at him and he killed him. And then he found out that this noise that he had mistaken, the guy had actually not done anything, that he had not harmed him. He was not about to harm him, but he had killed a man who had been letting him live. And so the trauma for the rest of his life was in knowing that he was the one who broke that understanding between them. And I don't know, but I imagine if I were in the business of counseling people who've been through wars, that a certain proportion of my clients, if you will, may be people in that emotional predicament of having to live with themselves for having made what they regard as a terrible mistake. Charles?
Let other people go first, and because I have a lot to say about all of this.
All right. Marilyn, do you have something you'd like to say?
No, not about this. I would love to hear what Charles has to say about this. I have something I can add about something that was first brought up a long time ago, but I'm waiting to hear what Charles has to say.
Okay, me too. Charles, go for it.
Okay. First of all,
Can you get closer to the camera and the mic?
I'm trying. Is this
Okay.
better?
Uh-huh.
Okay. First of all, we have to look at the cycles of violence and the cycles of trauma. Anytime there is, and I've said this here before, anytime you traumatize people, anytime you have a war, you're automatically giving trauma to somebody else. Now that's going to be transmitted to the next generation, and they're automatically almost going to traumatize other people. That's the reaction, unconsciously, but that's the reaction. We're seeing it here. We're seeing it in Vukovar and in Croatia. The wars that happened in the 90s. There were some studies recently, last couple of years, where the current generation is more traumatized than the generation that went through the war. And of course, they react. This is a large part, I think, of the Israel-Palestine, Gaza, Lebanon, whatever you want to call it, conflict.
Now, hold on. When you say they're more traumatized than the people who went through the war, that raises my eyebrows. What do you mean by that? How come, or explain that?
Because their parents and the people around them continually talk about it. And they take on the trauma secondarily. And that's a very strong reaction. It may be a latent reaction, but it's there.
May I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Just really quickly? My father, so on my dad's side, they were definitely victims of the Holocaust. I lost a lot of my family. They will not talk about it. They have never talked about it, but yet the trauma is there, and I know it's been passed down. So how do you, so that's different, a little different than what you're saying here.
It isn't really, because they have transmitted it to you and to a lot of other people. How shall I say it? Silently. And this is a constant. This is what's happening in Israel-Palestine right now. There's a lot of it.
Well, yes, but just the question of they're talking about it. I think my experience is closer to Marilyn's, The men I knew who were in World War One, especially my father-in-law, never spoke about it.
They don't.
And I know many other people who suffered through the wars, various wars, that don't talk about it.
Fine, but you don't have to talk about it to transmit it.
Well, okay,
Because,
but you said they talk about it all the time. That's all that we're
sorry,
questioning. Is
sorry.
that really true for most people? I don't know.
It's true for some, and there are attitudes that are silently transmitted from one generation to the other, and also societally. And here is a good example in Eastern Croatia. It's a very good example on all sides. And what you then get is, in effect, the conflicts that are just under the surface, and all it takes is a little match to light them. And it happens. And again, we're seeing it in Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, all of the rest of that now. Because the Holocaust victims and the victims of, what has happened over the course of many years, transmitted to their people, the Arabs and the Palestinians transmitted to their people. Again, silently, unconsciously, but it's a part of what you grew up with. And then that goes further.
Okay, I guess what Bill and I, the heart of our conversation was, is it legitimate to use self-defense, violence in self-defense? Because the only, if you talk about theologians and their notion of a just war, et cetera, main criterion is it's legitimate to defend yourself. It's not legitimate to be aggressive. But then when you ask in any one case whether the aggressor was really defending himself, he will say almost always, yeah, I had to defend myself. And
right.
it involves such things as expecting the other side to attack. The other guy was just about to attack me, so to protect myself, I had to do it first. But it was still self-defense. And sometimes that's true, or, a reasonable conclusion, especially if the other side is sitting there with his guns cocked and ready to fire, But other times it's a misunderstanding. I would say the Russian analysis right now for why they went again, invaded Ukraine, was that they think they're defending themselves because they had to be careful and protect themselves from NATO. And there was Ukraine making life very difficult for the Russians in the eastern part of the country, and therefore they had to defend them. They were self-defending, and so on. So you make a case almost every time that what you're doing as an aggressor is really a version of self-defense. And we want to say that that's not right, that we should not accept any misconstruing of what is real self-defense. We should not permit the kind of war where you take the initiative in order to protect yourself from what you think might happen or will happen if you don't. What do they call that word? It starts with a P. Preemptive war. Can you do that? Is that okay? No, it's not. Just simple. No, it's not. But then you get really interesting situations like launch on warning, where they've got their missiles are ready to go, and if they see them on the way, then that's a good enough excuse to retaliate before they land, etc. So you're really then into a race about time and things like that. So I think that we have to say preemptive war is never legitimate, but it's kind of hard to keep it from people from doing it. And then there's the question of misinterpretation of the intention of the other side. I don't think that it was at all true that Russia was being threatened by NATO, by Ukraine, or by anybody before they invaded Ukraine. They did it out of a misunderstanding. If they did, I don't think the Russians really did it on themselves. It was Putin who misunderstood the situation, or just plain had evil intentions and wanted to do it for fun or something. I don't know what that reason is, but there's no legitimacy for that. So I think we need a rule of law that says any kind of aggression under any circumstances, taking the initiative to launch a violent attack against another society, has to be stopped. And it has to be stopped by the international body that's authorized to do that, which would be some sort of international police force, accountable to the people of the world and very carefully scrutinized. So I do want an international police force, and I do want them to be able to say, go in and tell the Russians, look, you've got 5 days in which to get rid of this international criminal, because he's been found to be a criminal by the International Court of Justice. You have 5 days to replace him. If you don't replace him, we are going to take action against you. So they have to replace anybody who is leading a violent attack against another country. Okay, that's my spiel. I'm sorry I talk too much, but can't help it.
My beloved just returned here, and I've got some chores to do. I'm going to have to leave. Please note in the chat I've given my new email, because the old one's going to go away pretty soon, Meta. And with respect to what we've been talking about today, I welcome also further thoughts from the other 3 folks who have, Charles and Marilyn and Alexi, who've joined us today. And I appreciate the opportunity to remind myself about what I said today and get it off my chest. These opportunities are few and far between once you decide to try to simplify your life and leave saving the world for the most part to other people. So thanks to all of you, and I look forward
Where are
to speaking
you?
with you again.
Where are you?
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry?
Where are you?
I am in a rural community on a mountain about 20 miles from Victoria, British Columbia, and the
Lovely.
southern tip of Vancouver Island.
Sounds beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
so much,
Charles?
Bill.
I said it sounds absolutely beautiful.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is. We came here 25 years ago. We have been Canadian citizens for a long time, and we consider ourselves really, really blessed.
And you've contributed a lot by your comments today, because this is a conversation we should have every now and then. It's never going to be ended. This is a conversation will go on way past our lifetimes. But
You're right.
it's a conversation we need every so often.
Thank you, Meta.
Mm-hmm. All right. So my good wishes to your wife, Bill. Goodbye. He's gone. Okay, so where are we now? Let's see, Charles. I want an update from you about your situation. I think you've been in a financial crisis.
We still are.
Huh?
We still are. And if you know of any potential donors, we are really in trouble. I'm writing to everybody I know.
Yeah, I wish I did.
And The irony of that is that we're getting more and more requests for work and essential work. I'm doing, and Alexia knows this, work with with deserters from Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working with a Quaker in Georgia. And yeah.
Tell us about it, because I'm wondering how they are faring. Are these people in Croatia now, or are you doing it?
Well, they're trying to get into Germany. And now,
Where are they?
what?
Where are they?
They're all
Where are
over
they
the
now?
place. Yeah.
Hmm?
Some of them are in Armenia.
Mhm.
And in fact, a German citizen was arrested very recently for assisting them to get into Germany. He's in jail now.
Oh boy. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is somebody I know who is part of a donor organization.
Okay, now look, I'm going to be doing a forum with two people, and it's relevant to this. One being Lloyd Axworthy. Lloyd Axworthy
That
was
name
a
sounds
foreign
very
minister.
familiar.
The name should be familiar because he was foreign minister of Canada for 10, 15 years during, and he was probably the best foreign minister we ever had. And
Really?
he was the one who did the Ottawa process, which is a new way of getting past some roadblocks in international relations and forming a treaty without the support of the EU, or the not under the control of the UN, but independently. And he did it. So it was a real breakthrough, not just in the importance of the landmines treaty is, of course, indisputable, but the fact that the procedure that he invented is wonderful. He has a new book out, and he's one of the members of the board of directors of Project Save the World. So
well.
I have been after him to talk to me about the situation of people trying to leave Russia, but being unable to get papers to go where they want to go. He is the head now. I don't know what this title is, president or something else, of the World Refugee and Migration Council, which is an international NGO of great importance that can influence public policy about refugees and migrants. And so he has agreed. He was writing his book, so he didn't want to talk to people for a while, but it's out now, and it's a memoir, and it's so he's ready to be on a forum. So I'm having a conversation set up with him and Konstantin Samoylov, whom Alexei will have recognized the name, because I deal with Konstantin rather often now. And Konstantin is one of those people who left, as Alexei did, left the country rather than be sent to fight against Ukraine. So these are people who are, in a way, conscientious objectors.
Right.
And I don't know whether they would call themselves that, because I think legally a conscientious objector is somebody who will not fight any war. And many of these people would say, yeah, I would fight to defend my country if it were being attacked, but I'm not going to fight this war because it's a wrong war. So they may not qualify to be considered conscientious objectors, even in countries that recognize conscientious objection as a legal position. But at any rate, I want to set that up. And one of the things that we want to talk about is not only the people who fled the country to keep from being mobilized or drafted and sent to war, but also those people who were sent to war and then deserted, because they should all be greeted with garlands of flowers whenever they, show up. We should
And
be
there's
welcoming
one,
them and bringing them in and taking care of them and welcoming them for what they are doing. And instead, we're excluding them. And
Yeah, and there's
therefore, I
one
would
guy,
like to have some of these people that you're in touch with. I want to talk to them and maybe get one or two of them to be on the show with these other two men.
sure, that's not a problem. Or I
Tell
don't
us,
think it is. You have to write to my colleague Misha Elizbashvili in Tbilisi. He's a Quaker who's coordinating all of this.
okay. You
And
have to put that in the chat or email me. It's better to email
I
me.
will do. I will do.
And
And if I
that
forget,
way,
please remind me.
uh, okay.
Please send me an email and remind me.
Well, I
Um,
wonder what happened to Alexei, because this is the very moment that I would want him to speak about this, since he's
Yeah.
one of those people, along
Yeah.
with Constantine, almost probably the same week, or not maybe even the same day. They left Russia because they would have been, or there was a possibility that they would have been mobilized and sent to war.
And there's a guy who's a member of this group who is LGBT and who now is in Norway. But the Norwegians are sending him back to Finland, and he's very afraid that the Finns are going to send him back to Russia. And he's afraid of being tortured and
Mm.
maybe even killed. So
When people in Finland are asked why they are doing that, what earthly justification do they give?
I'm not sure.
It
I
is
don't,
so irrational and so counterproductive and so evil
I
that I
agree with
just
you.
can't imagine anybody justifying it.
I agree with you. I just wrote a support letter for this guy. There is so much. Meta, you asked me about the financial situation. There are two of us here, myself and a woman called Sandra Maric. And we're trying to do a lot of stuff online. We're also working with the Africans, in refugee camps in, for example, Malawi. And it's all over the world. And here we need about, what is it, 4,000 euros a month is what we need. And we're not getting it.
Mhm.
And so
Well, I don't know if anybody here is experienced in fundraising. I am the worst fundraiser in the world. I just
I can
completely
imagine.
this. I don't like to ask for money, and somebody offers it to me, I sometimes say, "Oh, no, no, thanks." When I do,
Yeah,
I do need it. But here comes Richard Denton, and I'm sure that he is a very experienced man with fundraising, and he's going to solve your problems any minute.
yeah, right.
So, Richard, you just vanished. I guess I scared him away. But we do have somebody else who's joining us, is Brian von Hertzen. And that's going to be a good thing because this is a man who has, if he's in Australia, which is where he normally is, he has to get up in the middle of the night to come and be, on our show. And occasionally he's even willing to do it. So you're muted so far, Brian, but
Morning, Meta. How are you
hello.
this morning?
Yes, it's 3:15 our time PM here. So I am fine, thank you. How's everything in Australia?
Doing well. It's just about 5 in the morning here, and the birds are starting to chirp, so I'm slowly getting up, but very glad to join you today. And I have some amazing revelations to understand, and we're hoping to re-brighten our planet if we can.
Well, we've been talking about doing fundraising, but we haven't got very far. So I think I will declare the subject moot and ask you to tell us about your big news.
Oh, certainly. Well, right now, there's something that the world is experiencing that is somewhat unprecedented, and it's based on the research of Leon Simons. And it's something that he calls aerosol termination shock. And that's why the forests are burning right now. And it's because we have an unprecedented amount of heat going into the ocean, and it's resulting in a huge amount of warming. And, we're working to actually do something about it. So we're applying for funding, which is related to your previous topic, for a couple of modeling studies and limited trials to test at a very small scale the extent to which we can use simple natural processes like sea spray to restore the aerosols that have been cut off by the intentional policies of the IMO that had this horrific side effect of actually causing our forests to burn on fire. Fires the size of Italy occurring right now in the Amazon and Brazil.
Okay, well, I believe every word you said, but I don't understand 10% of it. What is the connection between the fires in Brazil and whatever the whoever did? Go on, you're going to have to work at this.
Oh, that's fine. No worries. So between 2015 and 2023, the IMO, in its infinite wisdom,
Now, who's in the
demanded,
IMO?
the International Maritime Organization in the UK. It's the governing body for all international shipping, international waters.
Mm.
So they required that the entire shipping industry cut their emissions, not only near shore, but all the way across the Atlantic and all the way across the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's okay near shore, near cities, to reduce the aerosols. That makes a lot of sense. But their unintended side effect, or maybe, I don't even know how unintentional it was. The side effect is we've got an aerosol termination shock that's occurred, and that's warming up our oceans at an unprecedented level that results in more water vapor, more heating, and actually is a result of the Canadian, and I would say also the Brazilian wildfires resulting from this.
Oh, okay. Well, but this thing about cutting the sulfur emissions from bunker fuel, I
Right.
think that's what that was, right? And it was to protect us from air pollution, right? And it sounded good. So I think it was after the fact that people began to say, well, but it had this bad a side effect too, is it reduced the reflectivity of the ship trails, and therefore warmed the planet. They didn't know that beforehand, did they, Brian?
I think yes, in the past decade, there's been this intentional lack of attention at the side effects. That they just thought, they kind of went way past the target. The target was reduce the health effects of these aerosols near cities, near population centers, near land. But you go off in the international ocean, and those aerosols are not going to affect the population.
Mm.
They're not going to affect humanity. And yet they have a profound effect on our environment. And this is what's now occurring. Now, what we're researching, we're not actually proposing to restore sulfate, although that's one of several approaches. What we're saying is there's natural sea spray that occurs all the time. And we could actually have a profound effect just by, utilizing natural sea spray and utilizing biogenic aerosols. You know that plant algae produces aerosols all the time, but we've lost 1/3 hectares of seaweed forests in North America and Australia alone, just 2 countries out of 100 big ocean nations over the past century, documented by the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Western Australia and the University of Tasmania. And when you lose 1/3 hectares of forest, I don't care if it's on land or in the sea, you have a profound effect on the environment and on those communities. And what we didn't know until just now, and we're just finding out, we're trying to support a PhD student to do this for his PhD research, is to actually understand the role of kelp forests in providing those biogenic cloud condensation nuclei that contribute to the marine cloud layer that keeps Canada cool. I mean, literally, like the Hudson Bay in the summer. I've been there. It's cloudy. Sometimes it used to be cloudy. Now, unfortunately, it's not nearly as cloudy as it was previously. We've got to keep the summers cloudy, and we need to keep the winters clear so that the Arctic can cool off. And unless we can do that, and get back with the biogenic aerosols and the sea spray, we need to do this one locale and one region at a time. And if it's small scale, this is something small scale that communities can do, grassroots, by cultivating the kelp forest and enabling the sea spray to come back. This level is enough to actually re-brighten our planet one community at a time, grassroots efforts. And it can happen in Canada. It can happen across the world. And that's what we're aiming for with rebrighten.org.
Oh boy. Well, all right. I'm on board, and it won't take much to get most of the other people on board too, I think. But I've been on board for a while. The thing that I'm not getting is I'm not quite sure what this new discovery is that makes that amplifies the findings that we already knew. Well, it's been now. I think it was in that paper on climate change of the pipeline. Wasn't that where the idea was introduced that it was the result? A lot of the recent warming has been the result of the rule against emissions from ships. And
yes, I was with one of the co-authors, Leon Simons, who actually got James Hansen to help write that paper. And he has confirmed that it is far worse than ever was before. So he just finished a podcast on YouTube that's called This Week's Climate Chat. And just look up Climate Chat on YouTube. And it just finished like an hour ago, which is one of the reasons I'm late today. I learned and spoke with Leon Simons, and he said, everything that's been happening in the Atlantic over the past 2 years, including +5°C anomalies in the North Sea and 101 degree Fahrenheit temperatures off the Florida Keys, where the first coral reef I ever dove on, that was the Sombrero Reef, died a year ago because of this event. It is gone. It's dead. And that tragic death occurred because of this IMO intervention, because of the loss of aerosols. And this aerosol termination shock is getting worse and worse every year. In other words, we had 5 times less of a problem 20 years ago than we do today. Years ago, it was like less than 100,000 Hiroshima bombs per day going off on the heating of the ocean. Now it's more than 1 million for the past 3 years. More than 1 million Hiroshima bombs per day of heat going into the ocean every day. And it's just, people have no idea how far we're imbalancing the climate because of these termination shocks. And guess what? All this infinite wisdom that's been applied to the Atlantic Ocean is going to be applied to the Mediterranean next summer. So the IMO is continuing to perpetrate itself into this and taking these intentional geoengineering actions in spite of being on notice of what it's doing. It's just like, they've shot way past the mark. They've already established, the reduction of sulfate aerosols, but they are killing the planet because we see the negative experiment at a vast scale. The negative experiment is conclusive about the North Atlantic and the North Pacific heating. And literally our planet's falling apart. I mean, the entire global economy is a subset of the environment. And if we don't take care of the environment, we're going to lose our global economy.
Okay, now I'm with you. That's wonderful of you to bring this up. Now tell me how I can get this guy on a forum, because you and he probably should be as soon as possible on a forum, in a week or two. Can we set something up to discuss this further? If not,
I'd love to
somebody else.
Yeah, I'd love to explore that. Probably the best way is to pre-record it. We can choose a time like early morning here at 6 a.m, and that's kind of evening for Leon and daytime for you. So we choose a time of day, pre-record, and do a forum. That'll work very well.
Mhm.
And maybe, another town hall, we could invite Leon to come as well.
Mhm. Perfect. Okay. I want to
Thank
say
you.
hi to Richard because you've been popping up and then fading out again. So at least your camera's on at the moment, and so this is the time to say hi. Well, I got you. Hi, Richard. Richard.
Hello.
Richard
Yeah, I
Benton.
no, I think I'm off mute now.
Sort of.
Yeah, okay. I'm traveling in Northern Ontario here. Uh, again, my wife is being the excellent chauffeur. I wasn't quite sure again on Brian's what he was talking about in terms of aerosols. Can you again just sort of clarify the what you mean by the aerosols?
Yeah, if you've ever been down by the sea and you look up and down the coast, you might have noticed a soft kind of hazy coloring to the shoreline as you look off on the horizon. And that's the natural sea spray that occurs thanks to waves and wind, and actually the kelp forests contribute to it as well. And that lovely smell of the sea is also coming from the kelp forest. So those represent natural aerosols that go a long way towards forming cloud condensation nuclei that help form the marine cloud layer that keeps the west coast of North America cool, and I think probably the Hudson Bay region cool as well during the summer months. So that's very important over bays and seas to have enough cloud condensation nuclei to keep a healthy marine cloud layer. And unfortunately, the NASA satellites and also the Big Bear Solar Observatory have confirmed that our ocean planet Earth is dimmer and duller than it was just 20 years ago, about 0.5% dimmer and duller. And they do this by the Big Bear Solar Observatory looks at the dark side of the moon and observes the Earth glow and how much Earth glow is coming back to Earth. So you get a very nice diffuse reflection. And that's a very elegant experiment, actually. But it's astonishing that a warmer planet is far less cloudy, and it's because there's less marine clouds and less sea ice. And we need to work to restore both of those to pre-industrial levels so we actually get back onto a healthy climate trajectory.
That's a wonderful summary. And I want to make it a little bit more elementary because some people, he asked what are aerosols, and there are people who need to have that explained more clearly. And I've been told that an aerosol is any kind of particle that's in the air except water. And the reason they have various effects, of course, but one of the important things is that water droplets, vapor, can condense on particles. And if you have a lot of particles up there, then you're going to have an opportunity for water to form and either make little droplets for the clouds or even rain.
I'll just add a little bit there, Mena, that liquid water droplets do comprise aerosols as well, particularly seawater, because a 1 micron seawater droplet evaporates to 100 nanometer salt droplet. It's literally, just the salt that's left over. And so even a liquid water micron scale seawater droplet represents a good aerosol for cloud condensation nuclei.
All right. Well, that's news to me because when I asked one time, what is aerosol? I was told it's anything but water. And that indeed the salt particles, once the water vapor has evaporated from and leaving the salt particles, that's an aerosol.
Well, it is. And I think it's just important to recognize the role of seawater droplets in producing cloud condensation nuclei. That's a very important role. And that's what the late, great Stephen Salter proposed for 20 or 30 years with his marine cloud brightening recommendation. So, it's ironic to me that the very year, Salter carried the torch for 30 years and helped us form rebrighten.org, which I welcome all of you to join and check out because it's a very active group and we have a lot of participation so far in Australasia and Europe, but we'd be happy to have. We have a fair number of contributors in the U.S. in North America as well, and so the point is, Stephen, after 30 years of pushing the Sisyphean rock up the hill, the year he dies is the year that ARIA first begins to fund, the UK government is just beginning to fund the limited trials that Stephen's been calling for 30 years. So we're carrying Stephen's torch forward, and it's a legacy that we have to do. He did the hard work there, and I think we have an opportunity to embrace what he's done and extend it and really
Are you
people understand.
are you involved with Daniel Harrison's spraying over the Great Barrier Reef?
Not directly. Stephen's done several experiments, but or Daniel Harrison, sorry, has done several experiments there. He reported most recently that he felt that the energy needed to produce those sprays was daunting, but we have inroads on that. We have renewable energy sources that will, in fact, make it practical, affordable, and effective to produce enough droplets to help communities and regions keep their climate cool in spite of climate disruption. So it's something each coastal community can choose how they want to go. And we are looking for volunteer communities who are willing to lead the way on showing how each municipality and region can help keep their climate cool during the difficult years to come. I think it's the grassroots effort, one community at a time, that is going to get us where we need to go in the coming years.
Well, now, is it that he's saying that he is now turning thumbs down on his own project? Is he saying that the energy to spray this stuff is too much to bear to make it worthwhile? Is that it?
He was teaching away from it. He said the energy is daunting, and it is, except when you look at the sunlight coming down as a kilowatt per square meter, and it's a few hundred, a few dozen meters across, and you've got enough energy to do it. So it's all a matter of doing the system engineering, which we're proposing to do, and actually going to propose to the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority to consider alternative approaches. I think that's where we need to go. We need far more collaboration and far less parochialism, which has unfortunately taken place in areas around the world. We need to be really changing the way we collaborate as we go forward. And we're very interested in collaboration because we need to globally be the change the planet needs on a planetary timescale.
When I talk to people, anybody except a few enthusiastic people like you, most of the experts that I talk to say, well, we need much more research before we can do such things. Even, in fact, when I talked to Daniel Harrison, he wasn't really encouraged. I said, hurry up, hurry up. And, he said, well, you have to do it scientifically. You have to, and everybody says we need much more research before we can do anything. And I'm saying, why don't you just start doing it and see what happens as you go along? Dip your toe in the water, and if it doesn't hurt, then maybe put your whole foot in. Try right away to start doing this, and the feedback from your own experience is going to inform you, and that's going to be part of the research. You may as well start doing it now. But I don't think they have many people on my side.
I'm with you on that, Meta. I'll call that professional prevarication. The scientists are reticent to stick their necks out, and they're not rewarded for doing so. If you move ahead of the pack, the tall poppy gets leveled by the weed whacker, if you will. So I think we do need to do that. And I quit my day job a decade ago in Silicon Valley, and we're all in on working to regenerate life in the seas and the soils, and address and make more resilient our communities against climate disruption. And that's going to be absolutely essential. I'm going to go all the way back to 1992, when Jacques Cousteau got together with 170 world leaders at the Rio Declaration of 1992. And Section 15 very clearly states, do not let scientific uncertainty be a cause for inaction. And yet we've had 30 years of prevarication because it's professionally convenient for scientists to do so. I'm a reformed scientist myself and an engineer with a PhD from Caltech. And it's like, look, we need to do small actions at community scale that can show the way and leading the way towards enabling regions, island nations, and even larger zones to lead the way on holding the line at 1.5 degrees Celsius and getting us back to a healthy climate.
Mm-hmm. One of the recent shows that I did was with Vincent Cerf, Robert Axelrod, and Alex Lübke and Peter Wadhams. Peter was mostly along for the ride because he hadn't really been involved with this, but those three guys are working toward a plan to save us from an enormous sea rise that's very likely to occur because the Thwaite Glacier in Antarctica is slipping off into the sea. And that is sort of like a cork in a bottle. And once that is out, then the rest of the ice sheet may fall off, which would be, as I think somebody calculated, 10 feet of sea rise. 10
More.
feet would,
Well, 10 for
all
the
the
Thwaite.
city on
More.
coastal lines. So the extraordinary, even no matter what else goes wrong as a result of global warming, you get that, and it's just pretty damn serious. So, but I said, well, what's involved? Well, it would be a big project. What they want to do is there's water under this Thwaites Glacier, or any glaciers, as far as I know, but maybe not all of them. But at any rate, that enables the ice to slip and slide and just slide off into the ocean. But if you pump the water up and put it on top of the ice again, it'll refreeze up there. And then with the water gone, the ice will get snagged on the rocks below, and that'll keep it from slipping. So that the theory is that would be how to keep the Thwaites Glacier and some of the other glaciers perhaps from slipping off and allowing the whole ice sheet to follow suit. So I said, well, good, get busy and do it. Well, we have to do a lot of research first.
Well, there's a problem there. The water underneath the Thwaites Glacier is seawater, and seawater is full of salt. And of course, it's going to be much harder to freeze that one. There are some ways of doing it. Also, I'm a little worried. I mean, I have done some research up in Greenland since the early 2000s. And that water has a lot of silt and sediment, and it's going to be fairly dark. Mm-hmm. So if you did pump it on top, you'd actually change the reflectance substantially. Now, I'm in touch. I'm actually on the board of the Healthy Climate Initiative, and Dr. Sumitra Das with Dr. Leslie Fields is on an expedition in India right now to rebrighten the glaciers in India and keep them from freezing. So we're getting day by day field images that are coming down from their base camp on their efforts and their expedition to rebrighten the Himalayan glacier to keep their water source going, which is really exciting, kind of day by day progress. So I'm in touch with him every day. I've seen some amazing pictures and videos, and they're making progress. We actually did a healthy climate concert just a couple of years ago, associated, I think, with COP27 or COP28, and the proceeds from that are going to this project. So we're very happy to be fiscal sponsors.
What are they doing up there?
Leslie Field has these little white particles of sand. There's a silicon dioxide sand, and these little white sand particles are reflective. So it takes the dark ice, which has been darkened by coal soot and all sorts of other things, mm-hmm. and covers it with a layer of white, and the white reflects the sunlight. And so it actually improves the brightness of the glacier. And so it's one trial. It's on a limited scale, but they're just doing a patch of a few hundred meters on a side. But it'll be enough to show the way on how this can work. And if it does work, we could use drones in the future to distribute this and really enable that to work. Now, what I would propose for a place like the ice sheets of Greenland and even Antarctica is that if we can keep the summers cloudy, will reflect that sunlight, and the melt water will decrease substantially. That works particularly in Greenland, where you have fresh water underground, and basically you want to reduce the melt water available that hydraulically lifts the ice. The Thwaites is more serious because the grounding line for the Thwaites will reach this point of no return in about 20 years. And so unless we can stop the grounding line from receding, there's going to be a runaway effect, a tipping point with the Thwaites Glacier. So it's a serious problem, and the seawater underneath, I would recommend, anything we can do to reduce the summertime melting will be helpful, but we may have to actually consider cooling off the seawater right next to the Thwaites in order to keep it cool enough that it'll stop eroding the ice from underneath.
I have only two recent pieces of information, and I don't know much about it, but in connection with what you just said, number one has to do with you mentioned that places like Greenland, the stuff under the ice is largely sediment. And I've read something recently by some people who are saying that there are places where the ice is actually pushing the sediment and making some sort of barrier out of the sediment. And that one of the technologies that they're promoting is the idea of actually amplifying that and using more and more sediment to build kind of a dam or a barrier that will keep the other sliding from occurring. The other piece of information I know even less about, but it may have been what's going on at Cambridge Bay in Canada. I'm not sure, because I did at one point talk to Hugh Hunt from Cambridge, who was involved in this a project to take, I think, to spray the top of ice with water and make it thicker. And if you thicken the ice, it's going to have a better chance of surviving the summer, and that's the name of the game. So I don't know whether it's Hugh Hunt's project or not, but somebody has recently reported that they were also concerned about the fact that the water they would be pumping up and spraying on top of the ice was seawater, which is salty, and therefore it might not work, but it does work. Apparently, and nevertheless, even despite its being salty, it still works.
We actually proposed this a half a decade ago with Peter Fikowski. We called it an ice volcano, and that has been pursued. Hugh came down to visit me just a few months ago, and so they are working on the experimental aspects of that. I think they had a student working on that research project, and at a small scale, it appears it can work in the wintertime in places like Cambridge Bay. It's possible to produce an ice volcano that would thicken up to a square kilometer of sea ice and enable it to persist through the summer. So I think those approaches can work. We've developed a number of those with wind power designs that can be placed by sea or even by an aircraft. And that could be done to actually thicken the ice, which could help the Canadian Arctic quite a bit.
Well, okay, so we have a lot more to talk about on forums and not just here. So if you'll help me get in touch with these folks so that we can pursue some of this soon, I'd like that. Yeah. And I want to say again, hello to Richard Denton, who pops up and then pops out again. And while I've got you here, at least say hello, Richard, and what are you up to?
Hello. Thank you very much, Meta. Interesting conversation here. Myself, I see the risk, of course, of nuclear weapons. Putin is now pulling out of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. He is making more threats to use nuclear weapons. And what we're seeing is an escalation in the war in Ukraine. Zelensky is wanting to get missiles to attack Russia and thinking that will bring Russia to its knees and that Ukraine will then have a victory. As we know, there are no victories in war. Everyone suffers except for the companies that are making the various weapons. And to me, it's just getting more and more dangerous to coming towards World War III. And I think, again, we've just had the International Day of Peace a couple of weeks ago, the International Day for the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. But as you have mentioned, it's all talk and really very little action. Where there's a number of groups, coalitions, etc., all trying to do this to get rid of nuclear weapons, but we have a very small but powerful group that seem to be perpetuating war in the Middle East, which is again extending now into Lebanon, and will it extend into Iran? Time will tell. So I think these are the problems that I see right now. Myself, I celebrated the International Day of Peace here in Sudbury. We had speakers, 2 high school students, 2 indigenous people, a person from Ukraine, another one spoke on Gaza. We had 3 politicians speak. Again, it's Cassandra crying in the wilderness, basically. But
Okay, thank you. And I
we
think
carry on.
Brian has his hand up. Are you interested in nuclear weapons too, Brian?
Well, you know, I may not be interested in nuclear weapons, but nuclear weapons are interested in us. It's one of the horsemen of the apocalypse, and we need to address this. I mean, we're looking at the death throes of the Russian oligarchy, as several have commented, including Peter Zion on YouTube. And I think one of the key things here is to understand, how do we get through this transition while protecting free democracy? How do we get through this transition where, you know, Russia will cease to be a power in a decade or 2 or 3, but we have to come up with a peaceful way of disarming them, a way that does not involve nuclear war. And it's a difficult challenge, but it's one that we must address as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in the 21st century.
Okay, you all should have been here the first hour practically of our meeting, because I just had a long dialogue with Bill Geimer about these questions. And Alexei.
Well, I would like to just say a few words about the disarmament of Russia. I think it's absolutely necessary in both military terms and diplomatic terms, because the situation when there is a Security Council of the United Nations in its present form is unacceptable, because it is being abused as a means of advancing Putin's interests. It's not probably as important as the nuclear weapon purportedly or really owned by Putin. We don't know how effective it is, how well preserved it is. There's no certainty, but at least there's a chance. As for the Security Council, it's an obvious way that Putin is advancing. First, he advanced the interests of the Syrian dictator, and now he's advancing his own interests. So something should be done about the Security Council. It's an obstacle to peace. It's an obstacle to international law and order in its present form. Something should be done. And as for the disarmament in the military sense, I think every next guy who will come into charge after Putin will have to negotiate. There's no single way he will not, because he will not have the he will not be perceived as an elected president or whatever. He will need to get support from people, and he can do so by raising the life standard, as simple as it may sound. He will need to show the people that he can improve the life, and without lifting the sanctions, no one can do that. And the sanctions here will be an efficient tool, because now many Russians take their pride in eating stale bread, but being great. in air quotes. So we're poor, but we're great. We eat stale bread, but at least we're an empire. Let's show them that the next guy will need to show the people that they can live a better life in a very basic sense, and for that purpose, it can be done without lifting the sanctions. And the West needs to be
cannot be done without lifting the sanctions, and therefore the next guy has to have the lifting of the sanctions as the top priority. Right?
That's where the West can insist on certain reforms taking place. I guess that's my understanding.
But they say that the sanctions haven't been all that, and certainly they haven't made Putin crack. So the sanctions have not worked as well as they'd hoped. However, one of the things that Lloyd Axworthy has proposed, and I suppose he's not alone. I don't know what group or community he's representing, but he believes that the most important thing that we can do is actually appropriate the frozen funds, the Russian money that is locked up in banks and investments in the West, and which, some of the countries are now at the point of saying, we will take the interest from this money and give it to the Ukrainians for
they do so already.
They need to do. But giving the interest is one thing. Giving the principal would be an entirely different matter.
Yeah.
It would be sufficient to actually change the military situation. I think they'd be able to buy the equipment that they need, and it would just simply be an impressive gesture that Russia could not ignore. Putin could not ignore. So I don't know how what the odds are, but that is certainly something worth thinking about. That we could. There is an argument that the money, especially if the ICJ rules that it is legitimate. It would be good to have some sort of international legal sanction for doing that. And I don't know whether there's any effort to make that happen. Do you know, Alexei?
So I guess there should be a very 110% a viable legal solution. So it doesn't undermine the credibility of the West, the kind of reliability, the belief in the Western rule of law, which has been created over centuries, and which can be, of course, the Putin's propaganda will use it globally to instill the idea into the minds of the people that the West is violating its own norms by just seizing the property.
It's actually very simple, and that is, Putin is already a work in the International Court in The Hague. Okay. So these are reparations for these war crimes. I mean, this is just absolute terrorism in Ukraine. It's insane. So that's very simple. You get a judgment, and it's the Russian government that's responsible, and these are reparations for the war crimes, and they should be going right away to protecting the established borders from 1992 or something like that. Furthermore, relating to your Security Council comments, Al Gore has been pushing for the past year to move the United Nations from unanimity requirement to a supermajority requirement. And this would address the hijacking of the Security Council and other UN regulations. It's ridiculous. We need to be moving in this direction in order to get effective results. So good points, Alexei.
Thank you.
There's this new plan that just, I haven't read it yet, came out 2 days ago, I think, that the UN adopted at the Summit of the Future, something like a plan for the future. Is there any talk in that about reforming the Security Council, either the way you're suggesting with this supermajority thing, or in any other way? I have not heard anybody say that there's even. I don't think the odds are very good in being, because you'd have to have the countries agree to do it, and the countries are not going to. But at any rate, is there any real a concerted effort being made to make that happen?
it's being championed by Al Gore ever since the World Economic Forum that occurred last January. And if you look at Al Gore's, he had an opening panel. He quite explicit about this, and I think maybe he even began with the last COP. But it's been over the past year, Gore has come out with a very strong opinions about, going to supermajority and getting beyond, let's say, regulatory capture by fossil fuel companies and by these dictatorships.
So that's like 60% or something like that would be required to make it work. Well, that's never going to happen unless you get all the countries on the Security Council to agree to do it, and they won't. So I don't see that happening.
How about the General Assembly?
It's a simple connection to go from the war criminal status as established by the Hague, and those countries that are being led by war criminals, they don't get to have the rights on the UN. I mean, that's very simple, and that's the kind of reform that needs to happen.
Okay, I have no problem to argue with that. Charles, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think we have to go to a much more basic level, to human psychology and to work in the community. And that's happening nowhere. That's not happening with the refugees anywhere, the Ukrainian refugees, the Russian refugees. It's certainly not happening in the Middle East. It's not happening here in the Western Balkans. And until we do that, this is going to repeat itself over and over and over again. And we're going to go through these cycles of wars. And we've seen it. We've seen that continuously. I know we only have 5 more minutes, but this is something that I've been working on for 30 years or something. And I see it. And if you look at the trauma literature now, current trauma literature, that's what anybody who knows anything about trauma is saying. And this is the connection between war and humanity.
Charles, there's nobody here who's going to argue with you, and because we all admire what you're doing, and nobody would want to say don't do it. But if I have to say, are you likely to be very successful?
It's a matter of changing attitudes, madam. It's a matter of changing
that's
priorities.
The hardest thing in the world to do.
Of course it is.
You can't change people's attitudes. It is, way harder.
But you have to.
Even reforming the UN. I mean, he's talking about getting Security Council changed. That's hard. But boy, changing millions of people who've been traumatized from war and making them into productive and regressive citizens, accommodating each other.
That's the task.
Well, yeah, but isn't there a way to get there quicker?
I don't think so. I hate to say it, but I don't think so.
Brian?
We have something. So we just published an article in February with Dave Holmgren, one of the fathers of permaculture. And Dave and I applied his dozen permaculture design principles to the marine environment. And I see an opportunity to apply this to the social environment as well. We have great technology, but our social skills have not kept pace with our technology.
Exactly.
We can no longer afford the tyranny of dictators. We cannot afford that in our civilization because we have existential threats and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in the 21st century. And so I see our opportunity as to move from the tyranny of autocracy through the tyranny of the majority in a democracy towards a consent of the governed. And for that, I look to actually some biological inspiration, and that is that societies in ecosystems are very decentralized. If you look at ant colonies, if you look at beehives and termite mounds, and other groups, like even flocks of birds, they're highly decentralized. They're cellular, they're networked, but they're not hierarchical. And I see decentralization as a key opportunity. Towards that end, we're designing in creating something that we're calling social permaculture. It relates to sociocracy and the sociocratic circle method, but it enables communities to make higher quality decisions than what's possible in a strict historic democracy. And perhaps, just maybe, by leading the way, by creating something new, as Buckminster Fuller says, don't rail against the edifices that exist, but to really change the world, build something new that makes the old system obsolete. And that's what we hope to do with social permaculture and cells and communities around the world. It needs to be grassroots. It needs to be decentralized. And this is our hope for the future, is to improve our social interaction and collaboration at a critically needed time to keep up and keep pace with our advancing technologies.
Well,
Well,
now you just talked yourself into another forum, honey. Sorry, but you're now no doubt committed to having to explain this further. I'm a sociologist, and I never heard of any of those words that you used. So, but I have earlier in the conversation before you came talked about my notion of creating citizens' assemblies, which use deliberations as a way of encouraging people to make better decisions. I think democracy as it exists now is people go into a voting booth and then they think, oh yeah, I've got to decide whom to vote for. I don't know any of these people. I guess I'll pick this one or something like that. I mean, it's very, or, you know, all kinds of crazy referenda are not any better than anything else. So we got to have a better system of having people deliberate and having them really representative of the human population. And so you're sticking your thumb up. That's good. So we're sort of on the same wavelength, even though I never heard your terminology before. Is that right?
Yeah, very much so on the same wavelength. I mean, there are examples of sortition and there are examples of deliberative democracy needs to replace representative republics, which is what we have now. So we need to move from RR to DD.
Perfect. Well, I'm on the way. It's now 4:01. And Charles, you have your hand up again, or still?
no.
No, you're through. Everybody through? Good. Well, we'll say goodbye then, because I don't want to run too much over 4. But it's been fun, and it's been, I think, even important, don't you think? I mean, boy, I don't know of a topic that would be more important than what we've already tried to deal with today. Well, bless you all. I love you, Beth.
Concluding comment. I'm going to quote Tom Chi when he says, Tom Chi says, you know, the planet's going to be fine. Within 50 million years, we're going to get over the Permian mass extinction and life will be thriving again. The question is whether we'll have civilization intact. We have a chance to save our own bacon. And this is our chance to get together and turn things around before it's too late.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Last Sunday of every month. Project Save the World produces these forums, and this is episode number 635. You can watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. People share information there about 6 global issues, and we welcome your comments too. To find a particular talk show, check the scroll list on the homepage or use the search bar. Project Save the World also produces a quarterly online publication, Peace Magazine, which now serves as a free-of-charge newsletter to help mobilize knowledge about 6 global threats to humankind. We currently email the magazine as a PDF or link to any interested organization in the world that works to prevent a global catastrophe involving war and weapons, global warming, famine, pandemics, radioactive contamination, or cyber risks. Just email us at office@peacemagazine.org and we'll add your group's email address without charge to our list. For individual subscriptions at $20 Canadian per year, go to pressreader.com on your browser and search for Peace Magazine.